Okay, let's continue. And before we move on to the debugging part, let's write a little bit of the code together. Okay, say I want to create a iteration with a for loop, say for I in range 20. Okay, and then well, let's do something funny. If I just want to do a continue here, okay, so in the body, nothing else but a continue. And what is going to happen? Think about that. And if I run this, am I going to see anything? Okay, how about I also do a print and then print I? Okay, so in the body, I do a continue and then print I. And if I run this, I know this is going to run for 20 times, but am I going to see anything? The answer is no, right? Because if we are doing continue here and 100%, this print I will be skipped. So we are running the iteration for 20 times, and for 20 times, this print I is skipped. Okay, so let's keep on doing this, and let me do an else. So remember, for the else, it will only be triggered if we finish all the iterations possible successfully. Okay, so I'm gonna do a print done. Okay, so well, let's see if we are gonna see this done, and the answer is yes. Well, so even though we are skipping constantly, we are skipping all the body of the for loop. Still, we have run the body for 20 times. So Python will consider this as a success. So the done will be printed. Okay, now let's make a change. If we change it to break, so in the very first round, I'm going to do a break. Say, I'm going to finish this iteration, and then am I going to see this done again? The answer is no, because if we trigger the break, and then Python will consider this to be a forced stop of the iteration. So this iteration is not finished successfully. So in this way, the else won't be triggered. Okay. So well, this is not a quite good example of using continue. So let me do this way. I want to do a if. So if the I mod 10 equals a 7. So if this number has the last digit as a 7, I'm going to say print skip this number and with 7. Okay, so say I'm really a person hates the number 7, and then for all the number has the 7 as the last digit, I want to skip that, and otherwise I want to print. So I'm skipping only 7, 17, 27, 37, and then for the remaining of the numbers, I'm printing every one of them, and I'm doing this for the range from 0 to 19. Okay, so let's run this. And you see 0, 1, 2, 3, and then we get 6, and then skip this number and with 7. So I'm supposed to skip the 7, right? So what do I miss? I missed the continue. That's a bad mistake. Okay, so let's do this again. So now the 7 should be skipped. So I'm saying I'm skipping the 7, so 7 is not printed, and 17 is not printed either. Okay, so this is example that how we can make use of the 7 to skip part of that. And usually we want to use this trick when we have a lot more code rather than the print, because this part will be considered as the main body of the iteration. I'm not skipping only one line. When I'm using the continue, I want to skip the main body, the major body of the for loop. Okay, so let's come back to lecture notes. And this one, well, this is kind of the code we have already seen. We want to check whether a number is a prime number or not, and I want to find out the prime numbers between 10 to 20. Okay, And when I run this code, I got this error. uh, this is really annoying because for 10 it works correctly, right? Because for the 10 we are able to find a divisor which is 2, and then 10, this is the number is 10, and 10 divided by 2 we get a 5, and then we print 10 equals 5 multiplied by 2, 2 multiplied by 5. So for 10 it's perfectly fine, and then we trigger the break because we have already found one divisor of 10, so we don't have to do further checks. So 10, that's good. And why for 11 we printed 11 as a prime number for so many times, and what's going wrong? Well, this is a really hard bug for you to figure out, and let me show you the answer. If you want to compare this variant versus this variant, what's wrong? the the problem is, well, for the else part belongs to the for loop instead of the if else. Okay, this else is not part of the if, this else is part of the for, and that's a problem. Okay, well, when you are coding the iterations, you want to be super careful with the else branch. Well, I understand for some cases using an else is really handy. However, well, for most of the programmers, especially the programmers don't know Python that well. When they see a else, they will first believe it belongs to a if. And the logic for the if and else is, if else, we have two possible ways. If we take one, we ain't gonna take the other, right? So that's the logic of if and else. But for the for loop plus else, that's different. For the for loop, if we finish all the possible iterations in the for loop, and then we will also take care of the else. So this else is really tricky, and that is also another reason I don't like a big indentation, because if the indentation is big, and then we can easily make a mistake. Well, does this else belong to the outer for loop or the inner for loop or the if inside? And this can really be tricky. So when you are coding with a lot of indentations, and consider how you can modify the code or redesign your code to avoid a lot of indentations. Okay, well, and for this version, well, here is another question. Is there any other thing that we can improve the coding? And one of the observation is we are looking for the the prime numbers between 10 and 20. And then for 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and 20, they are even numbers. And we know for the even numbers, they cannot be prime numbers except for 2, right? So for 10, 12, 14, those are the easy values that we can throw away without doing a check, because they are even numbers, and for all the even numbers greater than 2, they are not prime. Okay, so how do we do that? How about we simply add this line of code? If this number is a 0, we just do a continue. We don't want to do further checks. And if this number is not, so if this continue is not triggered, what does that mean? This means that the current number we are visiting is an odd number, and for the odd number, and then we do have to continue the further checks. Okay, so just by doing a continue, and then we can save a little bit of the running time, and then the output is also a little bit cleaner. Now we are only touching the odd numbers between 10 and 20, and then we are checking whether they are prime numbers or not. Okay, the next one. This is, well, take a look at this code, and you may find this code is really hard. Well, when I first see this code and find, ooh, this code is hard to read, it's hard to follow. If you want me to run the code in my brain and then figure out the output, that's very hard. So let's quickly go through this code. Okay, so we start x as 3, and as long as x is smaller than 10, and then we first want to check a condition. If the x is greater than 7, we increase x by 2. We do a continue. In continue, we skip the remaining of the code. Okay, and then otherwise we increase x by 1, and then we print still in the loop. And if x is an 8, we do a break. Okay, and then eventually I'm going to print outside the loop. Well, and if I ask you what is the output, this is the output. Well, we can see this iteration runs for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds. Okay, so this iteration runs for 5 rounds, not 3 to 10, which is supposed to be 7 rounds. So, well, it seems that this iteration got terminated early, or there are several rounds got skipped. So how did that happen? That's my answer. And I really want to have a little bit more information on how this code is executed. So how do I do that? Here is my trick. Okay, so right before the continue is triggered, I'm going to print a continue. And right before break is triggered, I'm printing a break. And then in the body, but originally I have still in the loop, and then I also want to print the x value. Okay, 3 things I have done. Right before the continue, I want to do a print continue to remind me a continue is triggered, and the same thing for break. And the last thing is, for each round, I want to print the value of the x, so I have a more information on each round. What is the x value? And this is output on the right corner. So this means I triggered a break when I'm in the loop with the x value as 8. So a break is triggered, and this caused this program to finish early. So let me ask this question. Is the continue triggered at all? And remember, we have the print continue, right? So since we have that and we don't see a continue in the output, this means the continue part is not triggered at all. We finish this iteration with only 5 rounds because a break is triggered and the remaining of the iterations are all skipped. That's the reason. Okay, well, and usually when you are having a long piece of code and it's hard to debug, it runs, but it gives you some weird output. It doesn't behave the way you expect it to behave, and usually there's something wrong with the iteration. And for the iterations, they are not easy to debug. But using this trick just to give you a few more outputs so that you can track what's going on behind the scene before the iteration finishes will help you do debugging better. Okay, this is really a handy way that I learned in the first semester I started programming, and honestly I'm still using this kind of trick now. Okay, well, and after today's lecture, and you are able to do the section 7C on CS Circle. And remember, all the CS Circle questions are due at the very end of the semester. And that's all the lectures I have prepared for today, and I will post another video talking about the exercises for today. So see you in the next video.